Hello model car fans. Welcome to the Muscle Car Modeler. My name is Raul, and I'm going to do a how-to on resin casting, making molds for small parts. There's a small batch of parts that I want to make for my GTO projects here, only because I only have a little bit of each one. A judge wing, I got one left, a convertible boot, turn signals, air cleaner pieces, and armrests. So I want to show you how to actually make the molds for these and a couple of different ways to do it and the pros and cons to each one. And I'm going to use Alumilite. It's just because this stuff is readily available at a Hobby Lobby, so I grabbed some high strength 3, which they had, and then the actual resin. But and they actually had it on clearance, which was kind of concerning, but at the time that's what it was. And I was just bought this a few weeks ago because this stuff doesn't store very well and it can go bad. So the stuff I had was a few years old, and I mixed it up and just to see for a test, and it was shot. The silicone's a little bit different. It can last a long time once it's catalyzed and it hardens to make the molds. I got a couple of examples of molds here for particular reasons, and then I use this to actually make the molds for the small parts. But the tips and tricks to making the molds that I'm going to go over, they're kind of specific to the small parts, because casting small parts and casting big parts are completely different tips or tricks to doing it, because it's harder to get the resin to heat up. The trick with resin to harden is when you chemically mix it, it actually heats up and hardens. If it doesn't get to heat up, it will stay soft and flexible and gummy, and it becomes a big mess. And it'll do that too if you don't mix it properly, because you got to mix this stuff 1-1. Different resins have different instructions for how to mix them, but the Alumilite stuff, you mix it 1-to-1, so they give you 2 equal bottles. But I'm not going to get into that specific part of it just yet, but that's what I'm going to be using. And here's the silicone to make the molds. But there's a couple of tricks to pouring that, but I'll get into that too. But for a quick introduction, there are a couple of different ways to make a mold. This is a 2-piece mold, this is a 1-piece mold, and then this is another 1-piece mold. This is for mirrors, small parts like this. It's really hard to get small parts like this to cast. A lot of times you got to mount them on something that takes up more resin. And if you ever notice the small parts, a lot of casters, they'll have it on something else and then you got to cut it away. Like the greatest example of that is Firebird Model Works. His carburetors have that big resin block on it. That actually creates more volume of resin and helps it get hot and harden. Another way of doing it is actually heating the mold, or using a blow dryer and heating the mold. So I'll put these down, and something like this, you could do a 2-piece mold, which is how I would do this one. It's a 2-piece mold. This you could do both ways. I think I'm going to do this one as an envelope style mold, or one mold, and I'll show you a tip on how to do that. And there's a couple different ways, and none of this is like gospel. This is my experiences. Take what you want from it and use what you want from it. But I've done a number of these, and this stuff works for me. It may not work for you, but it'll help you get you in the right direction. This is an envelope style. These are 4 mirrors. I had 4 mirrors mounted in there, and then the big resin block. And then envelope style meaning you split it open like an envelope and you pull the parts out. So it's kind of hard to do it this way. And once you get the stuff out of there, you got to cut, split it. See, this mold is splitting. This isn't. I'm not going to be able to use this one again because it's pretty much not flexible when they start to tear like that. Where this one is still very flexible and very pliable. So I can. And this is seats. This is just a 1-piece mold, and you just pour the resin in here, let it harden, and then you pop the seat out. It's a pair of seats. So this is a 1-piece mold, and this is also a 1-piece mold, but it's envelope style because you actually pull it open and pull the parts out of it once they've hardened. This being a 2-piece mold, these are air pocket holes to help get the air out of it when you squish it in. But see, there's the AMX intake carburetor and air cleaner that I use on a lot of my javelins. This is the mold I use for it, the javelins and AMXs. And this is the other side. And all these little holes are punched in it. So when you pour resin in here, and you put it down and you push this in, it squishes out. So this is a way to get the air out. So you don't want the air trapped in here. Air is your enemy, and you got to think of this as a liquid and a fluid. So when you're pouring the resin in, it is a liquid. You need to make sure you get the air pockets out, and it's got to happen in a timely manner. And punching all these little holes in it is a way to do that. And once the resin hardens, you can cut them off and throw them away, much like the sprue in plastic. So it's just another way of doing that. But these are some examples of the silicone molds and what I'm going to be making. Now I use this as a way to trap them. So as you can see, you recognize some of these, they were poured in this box. So this was back here, this was more up front, actually this was this corner. And then you know, this is the same thing right here. And then you can put these in here to dam it up any way you want. But this is molded. This is actually, if I remember right, a fishing like little plastic tackle box I picked up at Walmart. But it's great for keeping the resin, the silicone in here when you pour and make the molds. So that's some of the equipment you're going to need. And then you're going to need clay, which I got a huge chunk of clay. And then cups to mix the silicone and pour some of that stuff. So I'm going to get some of this going, but I figure I'm going to do a one-piece mold for these 4 items, the air cleaner, and then since I only need a couple sets of these turn signals, I'll mount them kind of like this envelope style with the block or something, and get them up there so that all I got to do is cut the fronts off and use those when I cast them. Stop here for a quick second, and I'm going to start mocking up and getting the clay and making it, and I'll explain what I'm doing at that point. Okay, I happen to remember I still had my masters from when I cast the seats for my 71 GTO. There's the rear seat that was spliced out, and the front seats. So I dug out my masters, and then the wheels when I was casting the wheels. But main reason was I had a set of turn signals that I forgot were still in there. So I have those turn signals, and there's the Model House ones. The Model House ones I mounted in some clay to help space it up, and then I'll sand it off of them, and then I'm gonna tack those 2 in. But here you can see in the box, that way you can see what's going on. Since it's going to be an open style mold where the bottom is going to be completely open and you'll just sand it, I use super glue and I tack those in place so that they're not going to move, and then I'll pour silicone on them, and I'm going to put those 4 marker lights right there, the front turn signal lights. I'm going to put all 4 of them there and put them in the mold, and that way hopefully they come out. But that's where this is, and then I'm going to keep working on it. And when it comes to this, I'm going to just lay this right in here, just like that. And I'm going to pour the silicone right on top of it. And I'll show you that when I get to that point, when I get to pouring. So just a small update, and I'm going to keep going on this. And okay, well, as you can see, I got that in there. Oop, that didn't stick. I got to glue that. But that one's clay, that one's on a block, and that's almost ready to pour in. This is just floating around. I'm gonna have to pour a little silicone and just let that thing. But this one I gotta glue. It's not holding. And then I created a dam here because this is a removable piece like these, where you just slide them in and out. But the silicone will leak under it, so use the clay to create a dam to keep it sealed in there. So that's almost ready. I gotta tack that down. And then on this side, I started to put clay down. I'm gonna be sticking this on here. Matter of fact, there we go. And I'll make the first part of the mold on this, but it's just a little too big for, I don't want to put it in here because that's going to be really big. But I've got another way to make the walls. Some people use Legos. I got some acrylic, which is good for bodies, but there's a way to do it, and I'll be creating that. But I got to pour this in a segment or two, so I'm going to mix the silicone. I'm going to pour it in here, but I got to glue that back down, and I'll pour that in there, and I'll show you how I pour it and mix it. So this one's going to get set aside, and I took the lid off here, so we'll just move that up out of the way here. And let's get this glued down here. So sometimes getting this stuff to stay is kind of a pain, but this is just This is just temporary, as you will sand this when you make the mold. So let's just it doesn't hold real well, but so there's that. Okay, so the next step here is to get this and take out your silicone right here, and then you got to mix it. So, and it tells you right here, work times 45 minutes, demold time 12 to 18 hours. I usually wait 24 hours when you mix it. And it says to mix it 10 to 1 by volume. So you got this, and then the actual catalyst here. And then you need mixing cups. I actually found these at Hobby Lobby. They've got measurements on the side and some sticks. So I was there the other day, picked these up, because I've got some for paint, and they work pretty well. But I kind of like the idea of this one. Set that aside, because it's got all the ounces there, and you mix it 10 to 1. So here you go. You got ounces or milliliters. So if I go 4, I can add a little bit, but I like the millimeters, the milliliters right here. So, you know, there's 50, there's 100. So I know if I get it to 100, the next one up is 110. So that's 10%. So I think that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to be pouring these in steps anyway. So let's see. Yeah, that should be plenty. So we'll put that down and we'll start mixing this up here. Very careful not to make too much of a mess here. So I'm going to set that on the table. I know you can't exactly see exactly where it's at, but we'll mix this up here. And I'll probably edit this for time, so you're not watching me mix this stuff up forever. Because this will take a little while to mix up. Let's get a little bit more there. These are kind of nice that they've got a flat end for mixing, so I can, let's squeegee that off here. This stuff can be messy, especially if you're not paying attention and you spill it, like I did the first time I opened it when you guys didn't see it. It was all off camera. Alright, so as you can see, got it to the 100 milliliter mark there. So we'll add the 10% of this. There we go. And then we'll start mixing. It's kind of weird how it'll change colors. Like you see, it's starting to turn pink. Hopefully it's picking it up there. But the idea is to keep stirring it and mix it as good as you can. And just keep going at it. Try not to get bubbles in it, but with the amount of time it takes to cure, 18 hours, it'll demold itself a little bit, or debubble itself. But there are other ways you can pressure cast or vacuum the silicone out. That's more equipment to buy, and if you're getting serious about casting and quality, you can get into some of that equipment. But for little stuff like this, it's really not a big deal, especially you know when you're making a mold and you're only trying to get a few out of it. You know, 1 or 2, like in my cases, 1 or 2 at the most. You know, 10, 20. But, you know, you hold on to the molds for years. Some of them harden up and shrink, and so the molds don't last forever. And I'm going to keep mixing this here. You'll feel it start thickening up too. Okay, so that's after several minutes of mixing, and I like to take this and squeegee it on the side there so you can see it. I'm just trying to make sure that I mix it as thoroughly as possible. And then squeegee this off on the side. Okay, so that's pretty much ready to pour. I mean, you can see there are bubbles in it. That's going to happen. You're not going to get away from them, but they'll settle down. Now, the trick at this point is to pour this in a manner that you want to get it to where it pours into it. So I'll pour in a corner and let it flow across. So on this, I'll pour in one of the corners and let it flow across and under everything. And then I'll do the same on this side. Now this one, because this piece is loose, I'm gonna drop this piece in at the end. So I'll do a little bit of a layer, and I'm gonna drop this in, and I'm gonna do more on top of it. So I'll explain that here in a little bit, but let me maybe move the camera up so you can see a bit more into what I'm doing here. So hopefully that helps. And then I'm going to lift this kind of high and then string it very. This is kind of a way to pour it to where you don't get a whole lot of bubbles. So you'll do it this way and let it pour very slowly. And when you get it nice and thin like that, like you see it's a thin stream, that'll get rid of bubbles too. It just takes a while when you pour it this way. But I found out you do this and any of the bubbles, they might pop on the way down and you'll have very few bubbles. And I'll start doing the other side here and bury those parts. So let's break the string there. There we go. Then get down here and start pouring in this corner and then let it flow over the parts. There we go. Now this will tire your hand out too. But you see how I'm off to the corner and I'm letting it flow so it doesn't trap any air. If you go directly over or on top of the part, you do risk trapping air bubbles on the part. Some areas you kind of can't prevent it. You got to be very careful. Here we go. Let that flow a little bit. And also a thing I'll do, like where it's starting to fill those in, there's a good chance bubbles will get in there. So I'll take a toothpick and I'll feel some of the parts and get the air out of them that way. And this stuff, this one's kind of thin so you can almost see through it. It's a little easier to see that way. Oops. Just trying to pace myself and pour it slowly, but you see most of the bubbles pop as I'm pouring them in there, so you don't see a whole lot of bubbles. Okay, we'll stop there for a second. Alright, put that right there. Alright. I can kind of feel with the toothpick that that's where the hole is for the air cleaner snorkel. Here's the other one. I just make sure I do that and fish the bubbles out as best as I can. There's the air cleaner and a wing nut and around the edges. I do this to break the bubbles free. You can do this, kind of another little tip or trick. I don't know how many people do that, but I pulled bubbles away from areas, the resin parts, doing that. And I'll let that sit and harden and just put that off to the side. And then we'll pour the rest of this. Let's pour more of it in here. Alright. Now we'll do this part. I'm going to set this in there. Nope, not drop it, but that's exactly what I just did. I want to stand it up on the edge. I don't know if you can see any of that. Okay, got that where I want it. And it's sitting in there, so let's pour the rest of this in there. And of course, when I'm done here, I'll let this harden up and dry for the next 24 hours. And then I'll show you when we pull the molds out when they've hardened and everything. So we will do that part in the next step here. And I'll just squeegee the rest of this out just to get it in there. Definitely don't want to drop this or break this, or not really break it, but make a mess. Okay. Well, it's been 24 hours, so I recommend taking a toothpick first, and then seeing if it feels hard, which it does, and then using your finger to make sure it's hardened. I have had the unfortunate where I didn't mix it right and it was old stuff and the activator didn't harden the silicone, so it's kind of a pain in the butt to clean all that out when it's still a liquid and never hardened, getting your parts and cleaning all of that silicone off of them. It just becomes a really big mess. So trust me when I say that's no fun. You can see some of the bubbles that came to the top and hardened up here. And just the sheer number of bubbles, it's kind of crazy. But we'll get those pulled out of here. So, and then you can clean all this stuff off too, just kind of fun. You pull it right off. And when you mix it up really well, it comes off and you don't have to, you can reuse this cup. You can do it multiple times. So that's kind of cool. Here it is, it's all over the stick too. But it comes off. But I'm going to use this stick to help get them out of the mold here. So the first thing you got to do is start pulling the corners, get some air. So you see it's starting to come. Okay, here we go. Go all the way around. Once you start getting it to let go from the walls, it makes it a whole lot easier to get it out. So you can take the stick, just start pulling. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so there we go. So there we are. There's the parts trapped in there. And then you can start just pulling them out by just flexing it, just like you would the resin part. But there's that part. That. Just start pulling all these parts out. And hopefully they all come out without any incidents. And then you can pull the extra flash off of those areas. Cool. I thought for sure I was going to break one of these off, especially the one that I super glued. Because in an earlier video, if you noticed, if you remember, I had 2 lefts and not a right. So I basically cut that off and then moved it to the other side and glued it on to make 1 left and 1 right. So there's all of those parts. And then the air cleaner. So there they are, pretty much all ready. But on the thin parts here where it got, see, it even got underneath. You can just pull them, tear them away, cut them with a real nice razor blade, real sharp razor blade. I just kind of prefer to tear it a little bit, especially when I'm, this isn't really a professional mold. This is just one that, I'm going to make a few parts with, and that's about it. So I'm just pulling off some of that, and then we'll cast that in a little bit and give that a try, but I'm going to set that aside. Matter of fact, set all these parts aside, and then I'll put them back in my masters, but that's made. Let's see how this one came out. This one's going to be a little trickier. Since it's got one long spoiler in there, I want to be very careful on how I get it out. Matter of fact, this right here, kind of making for a nice little... Here it is. Alright. So you see the wing trapped in there? But you can see it. Hopefully you can see it. And then the best way to do that is to slice it with the razor blade, and that gives you the envelope, and then you should be able to pull it out of there. So I'm going to go get my envelope and pull some of this stuff off. Alright. Okay. And I'm just cutting right across here. This will end up being a flash line later when you cast it. There it goes. Alright, cool. Managed to get that out without breaking it. That's one of the risks of your masters, is when you demold it, getting it out of the mold, you do risk breaking it. But being that I really only need to make one more, pretty happy with the way this is. And we'll pour resin in it a little later towards the end, and we'll see how this goes. So I move on to the next mold that I got to make. I just move this stuff over and make some room. Is this. Go back to this. Now we had talked about, since this is a little bit bigger, here's how I make the casing for this. I've got 4 pieces of acrylic here, and as you see, they're just about long enough to cast a body. So there's a couple of different ways to do this. First thing I do is, you have to silicone these or seal them up. So I will lay one down, put it here, then I will do another one like this in place, and then one will go this way if it stays, and then I'll do one this way. So you can see how it's trapping it in there. So I'll do it like that, and that'll create the container, and then I'll pour the silicone as much as I need. And then you can fine tune these and tweak these to the size that you need. And these are great because you can go all the way down for a body side. But this is going to be a little difficult for me to do on camera, so you see what I'm doing here. So, and then sometimes you got to take something and help hold it up. Like I'll take a box or something and hold it up. Or even, this. This is the mold release. We'll be using this a little later. But, I'll mock it up, and then I'll silicone it, and I'll let the silicone harden and dry, and I will continue on with that. So I'm going to do that here in a little bit, so and I'll get you caught up with where I'm at. But because that's going to take multiple hands, and camera's kind of in my way for doing that, especially squeezing the silicone, I will get you caught up. I'll get that done, and it needs time to dry too, so we're talking probably another day before I can pour the silicone into that. So stick around. Okay, well, here I have created the enclosure for the mold, so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. and I used clay to hold it together to trap the silicone. So now this is pretty much ready to pour, and for time reasons I've mixed this up and it's now ready to pour also. So we'll get ready to do that. And hey, my little helper, you want to help me?
Yeah.
Here, come up here. Okay, ready? Get your hand. Lean over. Ready?
Yeah.
We're going to pour it right in there. There it goes. It's pouring. And we're going to keep going. We're going to put all of this in there.
All that?
Yeah, there it goes. See? And then a little trick to help the running. Flip this over and flip this back.
Hi there.
Do you see how I did that? So we're going to set that here.
What's that?
We're going to put this here, and we're going to
Oh,
and we're going to let it harden overnight. See, Ryan, it's going to end up looking just like this when it's done. Okay?
can I touch it?
Yeah, go ahead, touch it. Does it feel funny? That's silicone.
Kind of dressy.
It's kind of stretchy, yeah.
Why is it silicone?
Yeah, this is silicone. I'm making molds.
Why?
Why? I'll show you that in the next step. So let's put this down. Okay, and we're going to pause it for now and we'll continue on.
What is this?
Okay, well, it's been some time now. So we'll start taking this apart. See how the mold did. This is pretty easy to do on this. Get the sheets off, which is pretty easy to do. That's kind of funny. But you can see how it gets underneath. The silicone gets everywhere. So, did a really good job. I mean, these did their job and kept the silicone from leaking out and getting all over the place. Not a lot of fun when that happens. I have had it happen where I didn't seal it as good as I thought I did. And then the silicone drained out a little bit before it thickened up. There's that. Now the second step to this, you got to pull the clay out, but leave the part. See, there it is. So there's the clay out. So, and then what you do is you'll spray the mold release on here and then fill this cavity with silicone, and that's the second part of the mold. But some of the silicone that's snuck under, I'll just pull that off, get that out of the way. Not really the best job there, but get my razor out and clean some of that up a little bit. And mix up some silicone here, a little bit more silicone, but not much. Okay, and the next step before you pour any silicone in here, after cleaning the edges out of here, so I got it trimmed up a little bit, but I'm going to fill that with more silicone to make the second part of the mold. But you need the mold release. Don't forget this step, because silicone will stick to silicone and you'll never get it apart. And even this says spray it, let it dry, and do it a second time. It says on the back here, repeat the process a second time to clean and condition your molds. So I got that sprayed. So I got really good coverage. It's all over the place here. And then let it dry. And then I will do it a second time. Okay, mixed up a bit more silicone here. And I sprayed a second layer of the mold release in there. So that's in there. So let's pour some of this in. Get this last little bit going. I got more silicone than I need here, but that's okay. Pour this section very slowly. Okay. You want to fill it as much as you can right to the edge. Alright. And then now we let it sit for another 24 hours. And then we try and pull it apart. Well, this is now cured, so let's see how well this is and see if it comes apart. I poured a little bit more silicone in it, so that's why I got this. So it's starting to harden, but I wanted it recessed a little bit, so I wanted to get a little higher. But let's see if it'll separate from the mold. Sometimes that is an issue, especially when I'm using a mold release I've never used before. Oh boy. Here we go. I'm trying to pull it without breaking it because this is very flexible. But it's letting go. It doesn't want to let go right there though. There we go. Alright, it tore, but no big deal. It's still two pieces and get it together. And then we'll get this piece out. So now I have my original part still in good shape. And there the mold is made. And here's this piece. Now, little tip, you saw I punched air holes in one of my older ones. So here's the piece, and you see where the 4 pins are. I kind of want to keep those because that's going to trap air when you pour the resin in it. So there's a way to punch holes in it, and here's a, I've been shown this, but I don't know if it's a secret. You can use a piece of pipe. This is a big one. This is way too big, but this is for the camera. You can see that the end is filed to kind of a point where I used a drill bit and shaved it so it's sharp. Where normally when you cut it, it looks like that, you know, when you cut it with the pipe cutting tool. So, you know, once you clean it up, you can sharpen it with a Dremel or a drill bit and get it like that. So, and then you can use this and you can punch holes in it. But of course this one's too big. This one's great for bodies when you're doing body molds, which is what I use this one for, or interior tub molds, big molds, where you need to make sure you get a lot of air out of them. So this is great. But I do have a little one here, same kind of thing, and same kind of sharp edge where I had drilled it out. So you take this and you just simply push down and punch the hole. So there it is. And it's pretty good size. When you pull it through, you see how the hole gets much smaller. But it's enough. It'll get the air out of there. Work it around so it cuts 2, 3, There we go. 3. And then 4. So there we are. These 4 are now punched, and air will escape. And air will bleed out the sides too, and the liquid. So I'll do a second video on mixing the resin and pouring the resin and making these parts, because this video has already gotten pretty long. It's been 4 days for me making these molds and showing you step by step. So you got to take your time and be patient with it, but I got 4 days in making these molds just to show you. And what's probably going to be under an hour video, you know, with editing and shortening it for you, so you can see what's going on. But this is my video on how to make the actual molds for the small parts, and then we'll start pouring the parts. So these 3 molds are ready. Now it's weird to think 4 days and 3 molds, but there's just a lot of steps and a lot of things to explain. So I hope you guys like that and appreciate it. Let me know in the comments. But I will do another video on casting the parts. That one probably won't be near as long, but I thought about breaking this into 2 videos, but now I'll just do it as one. But thank you for your subscriptions, your comments, and I hope you appreciate this and learned a lot from it or picked something up here. Even those that have casted before, there might be a tip or 2 in here, as I'm always learning, and I've had some people help me along the way or teach me a few things. And a lot of this I've helped. To give a shout out to Greg Wan, we call him the master caster here locally. He showed me some of these tips as well, and stuff that he'd learned the hard way. Just wanted to share with you and give you guys some of the information and what it takes to do this. So thank you again, and you guys, you have a wonderful Saturday, and I will see you again.